winners and losers of this free agency / off-season period. So going on to the winners first. Number one, Minnesota Vikings. Just talking about the offseason period, they signed Byron Murphy, who I think is a cornerback one, desperately needing that. Marcus Davenport, 1 year, $13 million. Darius Slay tweeted on his Twitter, this Vikings defense is fast. You look at Andrew Booth, Byron Murphy, Marcus Davenport, Daniil Hunter, Harrison Phillips, Jordan Hicks is still there, who was solid last season. And then in the secondary, I'm not sure if they're going to cut Harrison Smith or not, but if they don't, it's Harrison Smith and Cam Bynum or Lewis Seen, who is very fast. And I think that with Brian Flores, this defense is going to look much different. And I like the direction the Vikings are going in. They cut Eric Kendricks. They cut Adam Thielen, guys who have been fixtures of Minnesota. But what Kwesi is doing, their GM, he is building this roster up from the ground. They've already said they're not going to extend Kirk Cousins. I agree with that because they want to win big. The Vikings have been teetering mediocrity, and I think Kwesi's making the moves to make this team more than just a middle-of-the-pack team. I think he wants to make this team contenders, and I'm all on board with it, and that's why I got the Vikings as a winner.
My winner's the New York Jets. Aaron Rodgers, pretty simple. Even before it was official, it felt like it was always going that way. So even before when I was doing my notes last night, I had Rodgers just to put it out there and put it into an existence. But now he goes on the McAfee show and says he wants to be a Jet. I mean, we could talk about Alan Lazard and re-signing Quincy Williams, so I thought a very reasonable contract, 3 years, $18 million. Bryce Huff got a second-round tender, who's been a great pass rusher when given the snaps, just hasn't been on the field a ton. But this year, I'm sure he'll get on the field more. We just lost a couple of D linemen. But obviously, Aaron Rodgers, he changes the franchise. He changes the Jets' entire outlook from going to a borderline playoff team to now a team that's going to be one of the favorites to win the Super Bowl. It changes everything. I mean, I don't think there's any way you could really undersell it. And like I said, this is just the start for the Jets. Aaron Rodgers is the number one piece, and then from there, we'll see what other moves get made.
I won't shit on it. I was going to
go.
Go ahead.
Dehls, yeah. I want to just tell Dehls something right here and I tell it to the audience and you guys. Bryce Huff. Don't sleep on him.
He's a dog.
I think that it's possible that Carl Lawson moves on from the Jets and we move on from him. Bryce Huff can replace him and do better. Bryce Huff is that good. He's that good.
We got to see if the efficiency matches when he gets more opportunity, but in his limited opportunity, he's been extremely efficient.
I was going to say, I'm not going to shit on you because I was you last season. I felt the exact same way, except now you're getting Rodgers, and there's a difference from Rodgers and Russell. Respect.
No, it's fact, though.
Of course, because Rodgers is.
I didn't mean it in a disrespectful.
That's how it came across, but I'm glad you fixed yourself, so I appreciate that. So go ahead.
Aaron just makes these guys a bigger winner than what they already are. Chicago Bears, is there even a bigger winner than maybe getting Aaron Rodgers? I mean, 2 first-round picks, Tremaine Edwards, Nate Davis, T.J. Edwards. They got DJ Moore, a number 1 receiver, and Aaron left the division, a person who's owned them for damn near a decade. So that makes it even more of a winner. I mean, Chicago, what they've done for their quarterback in the past month has just been extremely amazing. You know, they're the biggest winners to me. Bringing in the number 1 for your quarterback, which is probably the most important thing. Bringing in draft capital, which is still huge. They still have a top 10 pick, which is amazing. Bringing in linebackers that fit the scheme, that's perfect. Bulking up that defense that cost them a lot of games in last season because we saw Justin Fields, even when he's inconsistent as a passer, put up points a lot of those games and keep those games close. Defense just couldn't handle it. So for me, the Bears are just comfortably the biggest winners because of what they've done in the draft, what they've done in bulking up their draft capital, and then fixing that. Maybe not fixing it entirely, but definitely fixing a part of that defense, which is the linebackers. They still need some work to do, but they have a buttload of cap to use. So the Bears are the winners for me.
All right, so I have 2 winners, but of course we're going to go over the winner that everyone's expecting me to say, and that's the Denver Broncos. We needed help on the offensive line. I already mentioned in my top 5 best signings this offseason. You bring in Ben Powers from the Ravens to replace Glasgow in that guard position, and then you bring in Mike McGlinchey, who you may feel like that's an overpay, but at the right tackle, which I've seen has been a hole for us for a little while now, I'm happy that we can actually solidify that. We bring in Zach Allen to add to the defensive line. I'm fine. I'm happy with the signing, absolutely. But why I'm even more happy with it is because Randy Gregory, if he's healthy, is very good and was very good for us last year. But that's the big issue. if he's healthy. And he hadn't been. He would play, he'd get hurt, he'd come back, he'd play, he'd get hurt again. So now we add some little more depth to that, especially after trading Bradley Chubb. We need a little bit more help on the defensive line. So bringing in Zach was really great. And then re-signing Alex Singleton, we needed help at linebacker. Josie was great. I was happy that he was back with the boys, but then Alex Singleton came in and really solidified himself, and I'm happy that we re-signed him for 3 years. Then next is those Miami Dolphins. Trading for Jalen Ramsey for only a third-round selection was an absolute steal. And now you solidify themselves as arguably, the best corner duo in the league with Xavier Howard and Jalen. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, but why I don't have them as number one is because last year was probably the worst that we've seen Xavier Howard. And by the worst, I want that to be in the standard of Xavier Howard, where we understand Xavier has been elite for basically his entire career. And this was really the first time that we saw him kind of be lackluster. You mentioned it, lackluster for his standards, of course, but you mentioned it, David Long, bringing him in right next to Jerome Baker. That was an excellent signing for them, especially for the value that they got. And running backs, I would have liked them to be a little bit more outward and trying to bring in a better talent than what they had, because they re-signed Raheem, they re-signed Jeff Wilson, which I'm happy with. But I still think that that's the piece. If I'm looking at the Miami Dolphins, I think what they did was fine. Also bringing in Mike White as a backup kind of paid him a little bit more than what I was expecting. $8 million a year for 2 seasons, total of $16 million. But that was in a way necessary for the fact that Tua obviously does have the concussion history. You want to make sure that you have at least a competent backup, and Mike White is a competent backup. But I still think the one move that they do have to make is address that running back. I like Raheem Mostert as much as the next guy. I like Jeff Wilson. Jeff Wilson was really solid for them. Right? They did re-sign both of them.
Raheem barely plays.
But I want them to be a little bit more active, understanding that now Zeke becomes available, where Zeke did just get released from the Cowboys. Is that someone that they look for as a change of pace, bruiser type running back? Dalvin Cook, there's a potential that Dalvin Cook may be released. That's another name that I'm looking at if I'm the Dolphins. And then lastly, where apparently these reports got shut down, the Titans are not moving on from Derrick Henry, but that was a big name of who I thought the Dolphins would go after. But Ezekiel Elliott, Dalvin Cook, these are 2 names that if I'm the Dolphins, I'm looking at. But other than that, the Dolphins have tried to solidify this defense, and that's really what they needed to focus on.
Diggs is going to have fun playing Miami.
I'm really happy for the Dolphins because they found a backup quarterback as good as a starter.
Oh, my God.
That's always good to find a free agency.
I mean, that statement's not even rude. What he's saying is they found a backup that's as good as a starter in the sense of, hey, he's a backup that could be a starter.
No. That's not what he meant at all.
You know that's not what he meant.
It's not what he meant.
Thinks he's as good as
he
Tua.
thinks he's good as Tua. The joke was very blatant.
I don't think he thinks that.
Okay. Why do you think he giggled after?
It's not that. I mean,
Look, why do you think he
what
giggled?
would the production be?
Mike White would put up numbers for sure.
Remember Skylar Thompson was supposed to do the same thing as Tua? Remember that? People were actively on Twitter, on social media, saying Skylar Thompson is a better option at quarterback than Tua Tagovailoa.
They brought in
Let's
Ramsey
just
to get cooked
understand
by
how
Diggs
dumb
twice a year.
people sound sometimes, so let's just be conscious of that.
Okay,
I hate that.
So let's my other winner. I have 2 other winners. I'm gonna rattle them off right now.
Fine, go ahead.
The Tennessee Titans. I think that when you look at the team, you're not quite sure what direction they're going in because there's a lot of question marks. Ryan Tannehill, will he stay? Derrick Henry was shopped earlier, but then that report was refuted. But looking at the Titans, defensively, what they did, I love. Arden Key is a fantastic player who I think is underrated. He was a main part of the Jaguars' success on the defensive line last season. And the Titans are possibly going to cut Bud Dupree. He's not going to be on the team anymore. You look at Arden Key with Harold Landry coming back, Jeffrey Simmons. I love that defensive line. They lost David Long, but they gained Azeez Al-Shaair, who was the 49ers' third best linebacker. The Niners have Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw. Al-Shaair is very good as well. So I think replacing those positions, Bud Dupree and David Long, with 2 players who can give them similar production is great. And they just cut Taylor Lewan. But on the left side, the left tackle position, they signed Andre Dillard, who has been a backup with Philly, but has shown flashes of being a starting left tackle. So I like that a lot for them as well. And then the Lions. Signing Cameron Sutton, 3 years, $33 million. They need secondary help just to be bad. Last year, they were 30th in EPA per dropback defensively. You get Cam Sutton. You sign Emmanuel Mosley, who has shown flashes of being a CB1, but his main question is staying healthy. So now it's Emmanuel Mosley, Cam Sutton, Jeff Okudah, Jerry Jacobs, Kirby Joseph, Tracy Walker. this secondary is starting to shape up like a formidable one. And they also signed David Montgomery. He replaces Jamal Williams. I wish they would have kept Williams because I love him a lot.
Understandable.
The culture he set in Detroit. But Montgomery's a good back. He's all right. Khalil Herbert is better than him, though. He is better than him. He is. I mean, Khalil Herbert, he has more burst.
He's got more. I would say
I
got more juice.
I like running backs with burst. I like running backs with burst. That's my fixation. And
for the contract that they got,
for
the contract they got,
like
Jamal was going to be more than $6 million a season. Absolutely.
I mean,
probably not a lot though.
I think Montgomery on the field can do a similar job as Jamal, but you mentioned it, intangibles, leadership. That's something that the Lions are desperately going to miss.
After they stat padded his touchdowns, of course he was going to be worth more.
He did get a ton of 1-yard touchdowns.
Yeah. They stat padded the shit out of
17
his
is
touchdowns.
still
ridiculous for sure.
He broke the record.
Yeah, it
for
did.
Lions franchise record.
That's why he's going to get paid though. Like
Good
he's
for
going to
him.
get paid.
I'm happy for him. It's a great dude.
I had an honorable mention. And by the way, these are like, I agree with your winners too. I think the Jets won. I think the Dolphins won. The Bears won. The Broncos also had a good offseason. The Texans quietly making okay moves.
Well said.
They signed Jimmy Ward, now pairing him with Jalen Petrie. I love that a lot. You have Derek Stingley there. They're creating a formidable defense now. They traded for Shaq Mason. Larry Matunso, Shaq Mason. Their offensive line is looking good. Titus Howard on the opposite side at right tackle. And their wide receivers, I mean, I think the Texans just do the best job of signing mid-tier wide receivers. Like they signed Robert Woods and Noah Brown. Brandon Cooks maybe stays. He doesn't, but if he stays,
bring to Denver.
Let's say they draft Bryce Young. You know, Bryce Young now has an okay offensive line. He has Cooks, Woods, Noah Brown. You know, it's okay. You know, Dameon Pierce, which he's going to benefit from an improved offensive line. I think they're shaping up to have a lot of good players. And then the draft, they have a ton of picks. So if they can hit on those picks, the Texans can, you know, really elevate further than people think.
Commanders just signed Jacoby Brissett.
That's good.
He could be
He's their starter.
We're dapping that. Okay.
Sam Howell clears.
Brissett. Sam Howell.
There'll be a battle.
Down.
There'll be a battle.
I think that's what Rivera said. He said if a veteran comes in and beats Sam Howell, then so be it.
He will beat out Sam Howell.
We'll see.
There's a chance.
Brissett will beat.
There is a no.
Brissett
There's
great
a strong
last
chance.
year.
Strong chance. Brissett was really good with the Browns.
So those are my winners. Do you guys have a second winner? Do you want to name?
I said it. The Broncos and the Dolphins. Those are my two winners.
I'm good with one.
Yeah, I do want to mention the Atlanta Falcons just because they might have spent the most money. Jesse Bates. They got Chris Lindstrom, a guard, to a $100 million contract. David Onyemata. So they signed, you know, huge contracts. But when you look at positional value, you gave Jesse Bates a huge deal, a guard a huge deal, even interior defensive lineman, $10 million a season. This Falcons team, I think, is starting to trade for Jonnu Smith. Maybe starting to see their window is starting to open up. They don't have a quarterback. I'm not a big Desmond Ridder guy. So that is the one piece that if these signings were with a team that already had an established quarterback, maybe on a rookie deal, and they need the defense to work up, I get it. But I think the Falcons also see a very weak division and a weak conference, and Arthur Smith is going into year 3. He wants to make the playoffs, and these signings will help that.
Yeah,
another underrated part of the Jonnu Smith trade is that Jonnu Smith's a really firm blocker.
Yes.
And now it does not force Kyle Pitts to have to be that traditional blocking tight end.
hope.
That is the hope.
They still don't have a quarterback.
They don't.
but
But
I just look at what Jonnu did with
They signed
Arthur
Taylor
Smith.
Heineke.
He was really great.
Be so serious.
He might be better.
I mean, it's not
Taylor,
saying much.
I think that he will start over Ridder.
And either way, you're not in a good position.
what selection do they have? Is it past 10?
I mean, Atlanta won some games.
Nah, they're top 10.
Atlanta
They
won
have
some
like
games.
the eighth pick, I believe.
They won
Listen, I
games.
think the Atlanta Falcons, they made a lot of good signings, but if they don't have that quarterback figured out, then it doesn't mean anything.
They'll be like a 7-8 win team.
And now on to my loser. Cincinnati Bengals losing Jesse Bates and Von Bell hurts a lot. I know that they're expecting for, I'm forgetting his name off the top of my head, Dax Hill. They're expecting Dax Hill to fulfill those shoes. It's a lot to ask. Von Bell was a hard-hitting safety who brought toughness to the defense, and Jesse Bates was amongst one of the elite players at his position for years now. Asking that of Dax Hill is a lot. So I'm curious to see how the Bengals fix up that hole. And the Ravens, I just think that putting the non-exclusive tag on Lamar Jackson was an idiotic move because not only does it signal that you don't want to give Lamar money, but I think it's disrespectful. It's disrespectful, and it just feels like right now the Ravens with Lamar Jackson, that relationship is beyond repair. And that's the worst thing that the Ravens could have done because this guy's a franchise quarterback, and that's why they're losers for me in the offseason.
And as of 7 minutes ago, Lamar can officially negotiate with other teams. So it's been no noise, pitch black out of Baltimore, out of Lamar's side. There has been no leaks saying he's interested in these teams. Obviously, we heard the day they put the tag on him that there was 5-6 teams that weren't interested in him. But it is interesting that all these other moves are being made. We haven't heard anything from Lamar. Now he can officially go out there and negotiate a deal. My loser is the Chargers. Not because they went out and lost anybody. I don't think they've lost any free agents, but they haven't made any real moves. They did re-sign, let me bring it up here. Yeah, and the right tackle, and they had someone else. They signed a linebacker.
Eric Hendricks.
Thank you. Eric Hendricks, 2 years, $13 million. Trey Pipkins, 3 years, $21 million. You know, players that valuable. Don't get me wrong. You need them. You need a starting right tackle. You need a linebacker upgrade for sure. But this is a team that, once again, struggled against the run. They came up short in the playoffs, had a huge lead against the Jaguars, and they blew it. You're in division with the Broncos, who have improved, the Chiefs, who were world champions, and the Raiders are the Raiders. But regardless, 2 other teams that are really good and the better conference, and you have Justin Herbert, who is not going to be on a rookie contract for that much longer. We spoke about it, I think, last football episode, that the 2 moves they can make that would save them the most cap would be cutting Keenan Allen and Khalil Mack. And those are 2 of their better players. So it becomes a bit complicated for the Chargers to try to improve this team when they don't have as much flex cap or cap space flexibility. And also the free agents out there, most of the high impact ones are off the board now. Javon Hargrave would have been someone that's perfect that could come in and solidify that defensive line. So for a team that is in win now mode, especially on a coach that, we said it last year, but this year again is probably on the hot seat, you would expect them to be more aggressive, and they haven't been.
My loser is the Las Vegas Raiders. You trade Derek Carr, now you bring in Jimmy Garoppolo. That's a downgrade. Respect to Jimmy Garoppolo, but let's be real. Jimmy Garoppolo is just who he is. He's not going to elevate a team. He's just going to keep them afloat. And, of course, you have Tay. Now you bring in Jacoby Myers for 3 years, 33. I didn't hate that, but I hated it with the idea of you decided to replace Darren Waller with Jacoby Myers. That's where you lose me. And I hope you were trolling on Twitter. I really do hope you were trolling with the Darren Waller to the Giants. That's not really moving you. Maybe a couple years ago, that really wasn't moved. That would have moved you, but
he just
now
gets hurt a lot.
It's only for the fact of, no doubt.
But if he's healthy.
100%.
Yeah.
Last season, he couldn't stay healthy. The year before that, he did play, I believe it was 11 games, was not as productive. Tough. But what we can understand is that Darren Waller is a significant upgrade to the New York Giants of what they've had. So that was a W in its own right. But for the Raiders, what did you really do this offseason to get better? The defense needed help. You really didn't address that. The offensive line was solid, of course. You really didn't need to touch that. But with the number 7 pick, there's a strong possibility that you still miss out on the cream of the crop quarterback. And that was their hope. I'm assuming that if the Raiders wanted to land their potential quarterback of the future, unless you're trading up to number 3 to acquire one of these quarterbacks, because 2 of them are going to be gone with the 1st and 2nd pick, no doubt about it. Unless you're trading with the Arizona Cardinals, you're seemingly screwed at 7.
Yeah.
So really, I look at the Raiders. I understand that the talent that they have on this offense outside of the quarterback is significant. And I don't want to disrespect Jimmy like he's a bum. Jimmy is not a bum. He is a strong average quarterback, if that makes any sense. He's one of the better average quarterbacks that you can have. But really, the Raiders did nothing this offseason to get better.
Died at one of the better average quarterbacks. It's perfect, but it's
okay,
just like
thank you. I'm glad you can
like that's
understand where I'm coming from.
That's what we're doing right now with the Raiders.
Yeah. My loser is the Arizona Cardinals. Kind of a little bit of what you were saying. You know, they got Jonathan Gannon to kind of persuade guys to come to the team, kind of be that tampering type guy that can come in and bring guys. They've missed out on a lot of the Eagles guys that they thought they would get. You know, they lost Byron Murphy. They lost Zach Allen. They've only was able to get Kaiser White. You know, so a team who they thought they was in the Bradbury sweepstakes, they couldn't do it. TJ Edwards, they couldn't do it. They haven't been able to finesse any of the Eagles players that weren't on the Eagles to come to the team. And getting Gannon, you would assume that he would have that type of pull, that leverage to bring guys over. That. And it's not looking too ideal for them. So for me, the Cardinals, and they're still, I think they're still.
Kaiser White.
That's what you said.
I said that, yeah. They're still in a comfortable position, especially with the draft and the way they are in the selection. But in terms of free agency, you know, they're not a big-time free agency where they're bringing in big names, but even these names who aren't big-time names, they still aren't able to bring in guys. So for me, the loser is definitely Arizona.
And you have Watt retiring, Hopkins probably getting traded. Yeah. The Cardinals could also be looking at this as a rebuilding year.
But they're in the CJ sweepstakes. They're trying to convince him, and if that falls over, that's another guy you lost.
Listen, I think the Cardinals, Jonathan Gannon, that's going to be a complete failure.
Oh shit!
I think
this year's going to be bad. They could trade. I think this is the perfect trade down spot for them, though. Someone's going to be desperate for a quarterback, trade up to number 3.
This year will suck.
But I agree with you, Drew. Raiders are losers, and It gave me this thought yesterday. It was too much to tweet. It was too much words to tweet. I couldn't find the right way to word it, and that got me in trouble earlier with the tweet I had too.
It did.
So I wanted to say this on the show. Notice how the Raiders with Josh McDaniels, Derek Carr called out the team during the season. So did Devontae Adams. Josh Jacobs, when Darren Waller gets traded, says shit's sad for real. He tweets it. Devontae Adams, after Jimmy G is signed, says, if we haven't talked in the last 3 weeks, don't hit me about anything.
Talking about Rodgers.
And then Kelsey Plum goes out and says Josh McDaniels was not invited to our wedding, Darren Waller and Kelsey Plum's wedding. It seems like the players in Vegas don't like Josh McDaniels, which should have been obvious when they signed him as a head coach because he failed in Denver, yet everybody was blaming Derek Carr. Derek Carr got all of the blame when it's clear that these players don't like Josh McDaniels. I mean, Devontae Adams went to the Raiders to play with Derek Carr. They cut Derek Carr a year later. Josh Jacobs got tagged, and Darren Waller, they could have traded him a while ago when his value was high. They traded him for a third-round pick. And this, when his value was probably the lowest it could have been.
Yep.
And what are the Raiders doing? The Raiders signed Jimmy Garoppolo, who in a division with Russell Wilson, Herbert, and Mahomes is not going to do anything. Their defense is still a question mark. You signed Jacoby Myers to be your what? Wide receiver number 1, because I think Devontae Adams might request a trade.
You think?
And
That'd be crazy.
And even then, that team is not going to do anything in the AFC. So I just look at the Raiders, look at what Josh McDaniels has done, and the reason why the Raiders are one of the most dysfunctional organizations is because they pick guys like Josh McDaniels over a guy like Derek Carr when it comes to seniority and superiority. I think that the Raiders, this Josh McDaniels tenure is going to fail bad. It's going to flop, and we're going to look at this as another Raiders failure of the past 20 years. They've had a lot, but that's what's going to happen with this team.